I walked back out, and there were reporters in the front of the Capitol. And in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, a These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman.
So what you just heard there was a brief clip of AOC's speech on the House floor earlier today, responding to Ted Yoho, calling her the F and B word, and then also giving a fake apology yesterday on that same House floor. Now, I'm going to play you the entire clip of AOC's speech in just a couple of minutes. But before I do that, I want to outline a few of the themes that AOC is going to touch upon in this video and give them some context. I almost never play these full clips out, especially 9 minutes long, but this is such an important video for so many of us, especially men, to really watch and reflect upon. So the first thing she's going to note, the first important thing, is that men can't hide behind their wives and daughters when they do bad things to women. That being a husband and being a father does not by default make you a decent man. And simply saying, I'm sorry I said something bad to a woman, but of course I don't want to treat women badly. I don't treat women badly. I have a wife and or I have a daughter. But as AOC notes, decent men don't act like that, don't act like Ted Yoho did, and them having a wife and a daughter is not a get out of responsibility card for those actions. AOC is 100% right to note that Ted Yoho, if anything, should know better because he has a wife and because he has a daughter. Because what happens when he speaks to AOC like that is he, in his own small way, but even larger because he's a man with great power and influence, he's in Congress, he gives other men permission to do that same thing to other women, including potentially his wife and his daughters. So if he really cares about his wife, his daughters, other women, then he shouldn't be making those remarks in any case, in any way, in any context. And he did, and it was incredibly, incredibly offensive. AOC is also going to note that this is incredibly important because it shows how in many ways women are dehumanized in the political process. That this was not simply about political disagreement. That this was not simply about the fact that Yoho and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a passionate disagreement about the role that crime and poverty play with one another. Those disagreements can be very real and very passionate. I'm on AOC's side, but I understand that not everyone agrees with us, especially in the Republican Party. Nonetheless, AOC being called disgusting and being accosted right outside Capitol Hill, right outside the Congress, was an act of dehumanization. And she linked it to other things. How basically Donald Trump told her and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley to go back to where they came from, even though all four are U.S. citizens and 3 of those 4 were born in the United States. The act was done to try to make them less of a citizen, less of an American, less of a person because of their ideology and their skin colors and or their religions in some cases. And it was an act to delegitimize somebody, not through fair and high-minded debate about ideas and policies and facts and figures, but by simply saying they're not like us, ergo they're scary and they're wrong. And that's what's happening with these remarks. Maybe Yoho in the moment didn't explicitly mean to do that, but that's what he did, and that's what his actions reinforce. And finally, she's going to touch upon the idea that this shows that powerful men can have an image that doesn't reflect their reality. Going back to that remark about Ted Yoho saying, I'm a good father, I'm a good husband, I would never say these things about women, I would never disrespect women. What this shows is that you can have the image of the family man, the man that's good to his wife and good to his daughters, good to his sister, good to his mother, etc., and still accost women. That the people who accost women are not just the people that look scary, that are poor, that are marginalized, that don't have wives and daughters, but in reality can be the men that have the poster boy image of fatherhood and of good husbandry. And that's Ted Yoho, who has painted himself in his whole career as the good family man. And I think it shows that even these types can offer biting remarks that are meant to harm and silence and dehumanize women. And I think AOC really puts that well. And AOC also notes, that this is also connected to class, that AOC has dealt with these things before. She has worked a working class woman's job. And so if you think that this is something that's really, really rare, you're wrong. And that's why she's speaking out here. Because as she says, these remarks did not harm me like they were intended to. But nonetheless, millions of American women will face these remarks almost every day in their jobs or just walking down the street. We all have to speak out against it. Watch the whole clip, share it around. This is one of the more important 9 minutes you're going to spend today.
About 2 days ago, I was walking up the steps of the Capitol when Representative Yoho suddenly turned a corner, and he was accompanied by Representative Roger Williams, and accosted me on the steps right here in front of our nation's Capitol. I was minding my own business, walking up the steps, and Representative Yoho put his finger in my face. He called me disgusting. He called me crazy. He called me out of my mind. And he called me dangerous. And then he took a few more steps, and after I had recognized his comments as rude, he walked away and said, "I'm rude. You're calling me rude." I took a few steps ahead, and I walked inside and cast my vote, because my constituents send me here each and every day to fight for them and to make sure that they are able to keep a roof over their head, that they're able to feed their families, and that they're able to carry their lives with dignity. I walked back out, and there were reporters in the front of the Capitol, and in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, "a These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman, the congresswoman that not only represents New York's 14th congressional district, but every congresswoman and every woman in this country, because all of us have had to deal with this in some form, some way, some shape, at some point in our lives. And I want to be clear that Representative Yoho's comments were not deeply hurtful or piercing to me, because I have worked a working class job. I have waited tables in restaurants. I have ridden the subway. I have walked the streets in New York City. And this kind of language is not new. I have encountered words uttered by Mr. Yoho and men uttering the same words as Mr. Yoho while I was being harassed in restaurants. I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's. And I have encountered this type of harassment riding the subway in New York City. This is not new. And that is the problem. Mr. Yoho was not alone. He was walking shoulder to shoulder with Representative Roger Williams. And that's when we start to see that this issue is not about one incident. It is cultural. It is a culture of lack of impunity, of accepting of violence and violent language against women, and an entire structure of power that supports that. Because not only have I been spoken to disrespectfully, particularly by members of the Republican Party and elected officials in the Republican Party, not just here, but the President of the United States last year told me to go home to another country, with the implication that I don't even belong in America. The governor of Florida Governor DeSantis, before I even was sworn in, called me a whatever that is. Dehumanizing language is not new. And what we are seeing is that incidents like these are happening in a pattern. This is a pattern of an attitude towards women and dehumanization of others. So while I was not deeply hurt or offended by little comments that are made, when I was reflecting on this, I honestly thought that I was just going to pack it up and go home. It's just another day, right? But then yesterday, Representative Yoho decided to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and make excuses for his behavior. And that I could not let go. I could not allow my nieces, I could not allow the little girls that I go home to, I could not allow victims of verbal abuse and worse to see that excuse, and to see our Congress accept it as legitimate and accept it as an apology, and to accept silence as a form of acceptance. I could not allow that to stand, which is why I am rising today to raise this point of personal privilege. And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not. And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, our wives and daughters, as shields and excuses for poor behavior. Mr. Yoho mentioned that he has a wife and 2 daughters. I am 2 years younger than Mr. Yoho's youngest daughter. I am someone's daughter too. My father, thankfully, is not alive to see how Mr. Yoho treated his daughter. My mother got to see Mr. Yoho's disrespect on the floor of this house towards me on television. And I am here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men. Now, what I am here to say is that this harm that Mr. Yoho tried to levy against me was not just an incident directed at me. But when you do that to any woman, what Mr. Yoho did was give permission to other men to do that to his daughters. In using that language in front of the press, he gave permission to use that language against his wife, his daughters, women in his community. And I am here to stand up to say that is not acceptable. I do not care what your views are. It does not matter how much I disagree or how much it incenses me or how much I feel that people are dehumanizing others. I will not do that myself. I will not allow people to change and create hatred in our hearts. And so what I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a decent man. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. And when a decent man messes up, as we all are bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. Not to save face, not to win a vote. He apologizes genuinely to repair and acknowledge the harm done so that we can all move on. Lastly, What I want to express to Mr. Yoho is gratitude. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and accost women. You can have daughters and accost women without remorse. You can be married and accost women. You can take photos and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity. It happens every day in this country. It happened here on the steps of our nation's capital. It happens when individuals who hold the highest office in this land admit to hurting women and using this language against all of us.